Morning, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us today on Q&A with Whitey. Trust you're all doing well, actually, is probably what I should be saying. And a shout out to our industry family down in Victoria. Trust they're starting to enjoy having some of those COVID restrictions lifted from them, and hopefully we'll see a lot more. And as all the states start to open up their borders as well, I think hopefully a lot of that'll happen in time for Christmas, fingers crossed. And we can enjoy a bit more movement, a bit more connections with friends and family around the country. See how we go. Anyhow, trust you're keeping well. Are you ready for this morning? Got your morning tea? Good healthy one here for me this morning, thanks to the missus. And of course, the obligatory cup of coffee. New coffee mugs. I think Janet's gotten sick of me having grumpy old man mugs, so we're into something new. Anyhow, thanks again for joining us. And also a special thank you to our sponsors who support us. We appreciate all that they do for us, and a special shout out to the ALI, Bluestone, Suncorp, Finstro, On Deck, Prosper, Speedy, Len, AAMC, Strive Financial, Insurance Advisornet, Credit Fix Solutions, and Trailbook Loans. Thank you for your support, enabling us to keep doing what we've been doing all through COVID period, but also what we do all year, every year, in bringing free content to you and all the best discounts we can achieve in the marketplace. All thanks to these people. So let's get on to this morning's conversation. We're going to be talking to some gentlemen this morning. So ladies, don't get up me. This is a chat with all men. It is in preparation for International Men's Day, which is on the 19th. And we will come back and do yet another session with all the ladies again, not too far away. So today is a little preparatory work for International Men's Day, which is on the 19th. So what normally would be Q&A with Whitey in 2 weeks' time hits the 19th. So we will give way to that, and we'll see you again on the 3rd. So on the 3rd of December, when we reconvene again for our next one, assuming that's a Thursday, hopefully I got my date right, we're going to have a best interest duty catch-up conversation with that. Make sure you register for that one. It'll be our last chance to answer questions before best interest duty starts, and we break for Christmas leave. And there are already changes starting to happen. So something to, most of the mortgage brokers won't have an impact from those changes, but there will be impact for some brokers around Australia. We'll talk about that a bit later, maybe at the next session. So anyhow, what I'd like to do is to welcome our group of gentlemen from around the country, Mr. Steve Rasmussen, Jayden Vecchio, and Steve Dinte. Gentlemen, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate your time in being with us this morning. How are you all going? You well?
Very well.
Yeah, really good.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thanks guys for being with us today. I'm looking forward to your words of wisdom, but most importantly, I'm glad to see we've got some youth with us, because you blokes are looking a bit old, bar one. Getting a bit grey around the gills, if you've still got hair. Oh, we won't go into that, sorry about that. Jayden, thank you for joining us and keeping us balanced. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Well, what I'd like to do to start with today is just to, I'll ask each one of you separately, but I just want a bit of background on yourselves, not your business and so on, but where you've come from. How did you become, or how did you get on this journey as being a mortgage broker? Where did you come from in the past? Have you done something different in the past? And all of a sudden you've landed here. I'd really enjoy to understand that, and I'm sure everybody listening around the country would like that as well. So I might start with you, Mr. Stephen Rasmussen, up in what is my top right corner. Don't know what it is for anybody else, but you're over there for me, mate. So Steve, give us that little bit of a journey as to where you've come from back in the day.
Back in the day. Well, I probably at the time, very common career path, joined the bank straight out of school. So naming names, yes, CBAs, joined the little local country branch. Did my tour of duty around Queensland, right up to the Cape for a few years, bit of relief staff, and basically that was the first part of my career. So
did you do relieving staff in CBA?
For a period, year or so.
So did I. Yeah. Back in the early 80s, long time ago. It wasn't CBA
so
then. That's okay.
It was one of those, I suppose, the way life throws you a curveball. Got married, started the family, took what was available then probably the early days of parental leave. And as luck had it, went back to work in about the April, and about the August of that year is when the big restructures all started. So, and if you were on leave, you weren't eligible. So I happened to be back at work at the right time and picked up my package, and I said goodbye to the CBA. So following that, went back to them about 6 months later on contract. And as a lot of bank staff did in those days, when they, you go back as a contractor, independent. Did that for a period, and from there fell into broking. Another ex-CBA guy had already started with into the broking game. This is sort of the early 90s.
Yeah.
So, and it was just simply the offer, do you want a bit of part-time work? And it went from there.
So you've been broking since the early 90s?
93. No,
93.
95, sorry, 95.
Yeah.
So that's,
my goodness.
I know, it shows.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
But I suppose where I'm different to a lot is, for me, broking has been the perfect career in its flexibility. Touching back to when I took that parental leave period, once I started the broking, it was literally, I became house dad, raised the family right through. My wife was the full-time work. So, and pretty well since, apart from probably the first year or so, I've been home-based ever since.
Nice. Hey, you've got an interesting hobby. Well, it may not be a hobby, it may be a side business for all I know.
Yeah, well, potential is there, but yeah, I'm a beekeeper.
You're a beekeeper? Yeah. So go on, sorry.
No, it was one of those interesting ones. One year for my birthday, my wife basically broached, could I buy you this for your birthday? It was basically my first hive of bees. So she had a friend that was into it, so.
Yeah.
So it was.
And for our environment though, bees are extraordinarily important, aren't they?
Oh, extremely.
Yeah.
It's incredible, just, I suppose, the key role, both the European honeybees, which is the white hive boxes you see all around, but also native bees. That's the key to pollination, not only for your urban gardens, but your whole agricultural sector. If you don't have that, you lose such a degree of production.
Steve Dinte supporting our economy and keeping our fruit and veg industry alive. Good man. I might jump onto Mr. Dinte while he's swallowing that bit of water there, and Steve, get a bit of an understanding of your back in the day and where you've come from. Have you always been in banking? Have you done other stuff? What's your journey been like?
My journey, very much like Steve Rasmussen. Left school, joined the bank. I have an older cousin who was with the bank in the day. Back then, it was the Bank of New South Wales. And
who was that then? What's the mystique? Who did they become?
Oh, Westpac.
Westpac. Bank of New South Wales.
Yeah. And
there's a story.
He had a wonderful job with the bank, and he was doing shipboard banking. So back in those days, P&O used to have a bank branch literally on ships. And my cousin was on these ships going around the Pacific, having a wonderful time. In those days, the onboard banking, they would cash the travelers' checks, convert currency. They only had to work a few hours every day on board, and the rest of the time was, dare I say, I joined the bank. It never happened. Some country in Sydney, Griffith, just after the Mackay issue, their Mackay got chopped, and then
Oh, I think I've lost you there, Steve. Is Mr. D frozen up on others?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, we'll come back to Mr. Dinte, and when his signal rolls around, unfortunately, it happens. We're doing it live and on the internet. So, Mr. Dinte, if you can hear us, we'll come back to you shortly. Hopefully, your signal will come back live for us. So, Jayden, I'm going to step over to you, mate. Look, I hope you've got something more interesting than these boring old blokes have got.
Well, it's probably similar to these guys. Like, I was lucky. I got into banking kind of, I guess, like a lot of brokers sort of started there out of uni.
Oh, there we go.
I got offered, like, through a mentor scheme, got a job through Macquarie Bank in 2007, just before the GFC. So it was all great days, and I was pretty lucky at that time because I was working in, like, the support team that was helping the mortgages team, and I was helping brokers basically chase up valuations. And that was kind of my first glimpse into the industry, getting phone calls from brokers on the, on the green or from the golf course, asking where valuations were up to. And I just thought, this is the best industry ever. How can you, I didn't even play golf, but the fact that you could be playing golf during working hours, and then I'd get a phone call from them, Thursday afternoon at the pub, or they were taking clients out to lunch, and I was sitting there in the office in Macquarie at Bond Street when I was down there in Sydney, slaving away for my literally minimum wage, thinking this is just the best industry ever. So
talk about minimum wage. Let me tell you, and I'm as boring as these other two blokes over here, not as boring as you, but I cut my teeth in the 70s in banking, jumped out of high school early, but minimum wage, my first annual salary was $6,500 a year. Well, God knows how we ever survived in that era. And playing golf, Mr. Dinte, who's welcome back, glad your signal came good, brother. He knows all about playing golf. He and I worked together in the early 90s. He knows all about that gig, let me tell you.
Wow, all the deals were done.
Not about the deals, there's a fair bit of drinking done, I think, at the time, but anyhow, it was a while ago. Very good. So the conversation today is really focusing around how do you balance everything? How do you balance your finances, family, and business? I think Steve Rasmussen got it right with his darling wife was working whilst he was sitting at home playing, looking after the kids and deciding what he was going to do. That's not a bad way to go about things. But how do you go about balancing everything? I mean, we've come through COVID and all the challenges it's brought, but at the same time, COVID has brought forward some innovations, some progressive thinkings that not necessarily, or that were, not necessarily moving in a rate that they should do. Talking about digital solutions. So how are you guys finding going about balancing all that? I might stay with you, Jayden, just for a moment. And how do you balance all of that? Family, personal life, business, seeing clients. Is there a recipe to this that answers everything, or is it just hard work?
I think it's a bit of both. Like, I've got two young kids, so one's 1 year old, one's about to turn 4. And I know when I first started broking, like, it was hard to have boundaries. Like, I'd take phone calls at 9 o'clock at night and 6 o'clock in the morning, and just whenever they sort of came through. And since I sort of had kids, I've sort of had to put more boundaries in place, because I think it's not probably fair to them to be taking phone calls if I can avoid it, at 7 o'clock at night and sort of in that time. So one thing I have tried with COVID is just putting some pretty hard boundaries. Like, I'll, take phone calls from sort of 8 a.m. to sort of 5:30 now, and just work around that, because then I think family time's important. Like, you just, like you guys know, you probably got older kids now. You just don't get those times back, and unfortunately,
Jayden,
there's going to be more deals.
They've got grandkids, brother. They've got grandkids, not kids.
Yeah, well, you'd see how quick they grow up. So I think, like, family is important.
Yeah. So, and you find that balances out fairly well?
I think you just have to tell people. Like, I had someone the other week that was jumping up and down and said, "Oh, I have to meet you Saturday morning." And I said, "Well, I've got kids. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I just might not be the right person for you. If that doesn't work, like, I'm available these times, and if not, that." But so, I'm lucky because we're a bit established too. Like, if you're a first day as a broker, it's probably a tougher sell.
A bit different. Yeah. But what you've done is control your environment. So you've laid the ground rules and say this is how it is, and control your environment that way.
It's kind of
Steve,
like how the doctors do it as well. You know, when
Yeah.
you make an appointment with the doctor, I got my wisdom teeth out, and they're like, you can have Tuesday at 1:47 p.m. or Wednesday at 2:13, and that's it. And so we've tried to adopt that a bit, because otherwise, if people have you at their house at 9:30 if it suits them at night, so you got to kind of set that up.
Yeah. Steve Dinte, how have you, and not be disrespectful in this comment, but you've been in the industry a long time. You would have gone through all this, and you probably still have to deal with this balancing act somewhere, somehow. It might be a bit easier these days as you've got a much longer, more established business that's been going for, I don't know, what, 20 years, maybe longer? 25 years, I wasn't far off the mark. So that creates a bit of stability for it in its own right. How have you found that balancing act?
It's funny how a business evolves, and how, as a broker, as a business person, you should constantly be looking to learn from your peers. And over the years, I have learned. Like everyone, I started, well, let's say just about everyone, I started working from a converted garage in my home for the first couple of years when I built the business up, and I needed an assistant. My wife was exceedingly unreasonable and didn't want another woman in the house.
That's tough call, mate.
Why she didn't want another woman in the house, but anyway.
Yes, I'd never say that about my wife. I'd get killed.
I was fortuitous enough to find a nice office not far from home, which I rented out for a number of years, and continued to build the business. And then I bought the office here at Borkham Hills, where I still am all these years later. Some years back now, well, back then, obviously I used to go around and travel and visit clients, and as you say, Jayden, all sorts of bloody weird and wonderful hours. And there was a broker in Castle Hill, which is just the next suburb up, and he at an event, and he was talking about, I now make my clients come to my office. And I thought, oh my God, that'd be the end of me if I had to sort of say to people, look, you've got to come to me. But I bit the bullet and did that. And lo and behold, my business didn't crash and burn. And people started to see me in a more professional light, and come to the office. And up to now, they still do it. So through COVID, obviously we put together a COVID safe plan with help of New South Wales Fair Work. And so obviously we've got the sanitizer just outside our front door. We've got sign-in sheets and the whole box and dice. So through all of this, my business just continued basically as normal. Nothing really untoward has happened. It keeps on rocking along, coming in after 25 years. I'm obviously dealing with the kids of the original clients, which makes me feel bloody old. But
that's
anyway,
interesting.
you deal with that.
So you're now dealing with your original clients' children as for borrowing money. How cool is that? That's really cool. So Jayden, have you found similar experiences, or slightly different areas that Steve's talking about there? How long have you been in business for?
Yeah, so I've been doing broking for I think 7 years now.
7 years.
Like I think we've been lucky because broking has evolved a lot too. Like compared to when I started Macquarie, 12 years ago or whatever, brokers were kind of not rogues, but like it was seen as like car salesmen, that sort of stuff. Whereas now I think it's seen as like, financial advisors, accountants in that sort of realm or lawyers, where it's not unreasonable to ask people to come to your office because they're about to spend $500,000, $1 million on something, and to take an hour out of their day or that to come and see you is okay, as long as you position it in the right way too.
Did you see any drop off of business through COVID, or were you still fairly busy?
There was like that. There was probably like a month period when it all kind of went down in March, where everyone just wasn't sure what was going to happen. The sky was falling. Phone literally just stopped calling, and no one wanted to do anything. So we actually used that as a time we called. I think we made over like 1,000 phone calls to existing customers because the bank started to roll out like the the COVID plan, like, they said they could defer repayments.
Stimulus.
So, yeah, we were just, we started calling customers because we had no one calling us, and just saying like, hey, you're with Commonwealth Bank. Do you know, like, is everything okay? If not, there's these options. So that actually ended up, we got like a bunch of business off the back of that, sort of just trying to do the right thing. But yeah, it's funny when you sort of care for people, they kind of care back.
So Steve Rasmussen, how did you find over your period of time as being a broker? And again, you've got a fairly extended period as well as Steve Dinte. How did you find dealing with that balance? And how did you go through COVID?
I suppose I'll handle COVID first. I suppose for me, didn't have a great impact on my business at all. Partly because over the years, my business has developed to a degree where a lot of what I do is remote contact with clients. It's probably 3-to-1 ratio. Probably 1 in 4 is where I'd actually meet them face to face. So from that point of view, working from home, home office, so didn't notice any great impact. Similar to Jayden, probably that first couple of months is where you noticed a bit of a drop off in the level of business. But since then, it just seems to have taken off. But the work-life balance over the whole course of my time, and primarily being, I suppose, whether it's just being country-based, I don't know. But a lot of the interactions I have is where I'd go either to their home or they'd come to a home office, and it worked either way. But it was that approach of what works for the client. Sitting in the background, of course, is you've got to balance that with how does that impact on family commitments and time of day, time of night.
Yeah.
But yeah, in some ways, working from home, it might seem the best of both worlds, but there are moments it has its challenges, that's for sure. Like, for example, during the school age years of the kids, as I said, I was house dad right through from probably our second through to when they finished high school. So you'd be available for the school runs. You'd work like crazy in that sort of 9 o'clock to 2:30 period. And then you'd know very well you'd get out to the office about 9:30, 10 o'clock at night and keep going. Just do what you have to do. Or you do the weekend.
I like Mr. Dinte's environment. It sounds very, and Jayden's, it seems very controlled.
But then again, it's from a lifestyle point of view, hey, it's flexible. But you're never going to be a world beater, volume-wise and all that sort of stuff. But it's it's a life choice. And
and I think it's very similar to what everybody's saying. It's that if you get that mix right, it is that lifestyle. It's a life-work balance, but it gives that harmonic to meet what it is that you want personally, to wherever that lands. And obviously, for those people who haven't been in the industry very long who are listening at the moment, that obviously that the longer you're in the business, and even Jayden, who's probably been in business at the youngest amount of time compared to you guys, creates stability, so that when things unexpected like a COVID hits or markets move for some reason, or even if you want a bit of downtime, so I'll ask you how you manage that in a sec, that stability in having a business that's been running for a while, and let's call it 5 years and above, as to say, Jayden, 7 years you're saying you've been in business? Yeah. So it's sort of, it seems to be that there's a very sweet and comfortable spot that you wind up in when you get that period of time, and as you keep going, and we'll call it over the decades, that sweet spot becomes even more so. Is the ability to manage things. Is that sound fair to you guys? Steve, is that what you've experienced, Steve Rass?
Yes, well and truly.
And Mr. Dinte, you similar sort of thing? Oh, sorry. Steve Dinte?
Look, I guess my whole lifestyle is very different to what I deem to be a norm. we were late having our daughter. It's actually interesting. I left the bank and started my broking business just after we found out that we were going to have our child. My wife's parents were very conservative. We didn't even tell them I'd left the bank. And because I had been a mobile lender in the bank, and then I was starting as a broker, I was doing effectively the same stuff anyway. They were none the wiser that I'd left the bank, and we didn't want to worry them at the time. So that was something. I mean, our daughter's just turned 25. Our life now is very comfortable. For those of those who know, and Pete, you know, my main hobby is my bonsai, which is how I relax. I have a lovely wine cellar in the house, which I nurture, and just like all my family's up in Brisbane, so we get up there at least usually once a year, if not more, to visit the family.
Only when we let you, mate. Only when we let you.
We let you. Yeah, I know. We'll have to work on that. I've got to come up in January because my niece's husband is having his 60th, and they're having a big party. So obviously there's an invite for Uncle Stephen and Auntie Robin to come on up. So yeah, make sure you get it opened up for us, guys.
Yeah, we'll work on that for you, brother. No worries. And I guess, Jayden, from your point of view as well, it's, I guess the experience and the journeys that these two guys have been on is something that's in front of you yet, but I would think is a comfortable position to be in, to know that you're doing all this hard work when you're a bit younger, knowing that it creates those comforts and opportunities that go forward, which you probably already experience some of those now.
Yeah, it's like that, especially like if anyone's listening, they're new, like those first 3, 4, 5 years, like it's just you're phoning people, like you're constantly trying to get business, and then there's like a point at year 4 or 5 where people actually call you, and then they're sort of like, oh, I had a friend, or I heard that you are a broker, and suddenly it's like, wow, this isn't as hard as it was last year or the year before, and unfortunately, it's just a bit of its time that you just have to kind of plug away and hopefully do the right thing by people, and they'll come back to you.
Yeah. And that's actually a very important piece, is doing the right thing by people. And I think that's the sort of things that probably Steve Dinte has seen, because he's always done the right thing by people. Now, little trade secret here, Mr. Dinte and I worked together in the early 90s, so I know that man well. But if you always do the right thing by people, it has its spin back. So for Steve Dinte, it's been, now he's doing loans for the kids of people who their parents have used to write loans for. And that's only built because of trust, doing the right thing by people, the professionalism and the standards that you hold as a person, as a business person as well, as an individual and business person. So all good fun. Hey, Mr. Rasmussen, your answer to this may be no, but have you ever done anything that hasn't worked in your broking world? I'll talk about. Let me caveat that around your broking business.
I suppose a sector that, early years, I'll preface it by saying when I came out of the bank, we were trained across the whole spectrum of everything from personal loans through to small business commercial. As a broker, when you start out in those first years, you're trying to build your business, you build your contacts, you'll have a go at anything as far as the type of deal you're trying to do. And the ones that just out of sheer lack of knowledge, lack of experience or contacts, what I was end up with quite a few leads over probably a year or two for property development. One guy trying to bring in a flight simulator to set up a flight training center. Those sort of things that you can see from your training, you can tell there's a deal there to be done. But despite your best efforts and your contacts, it ends up going nowhere. And it was probably in that first 5 to 10 years until you fine tune and say, that's just not my space. You come back to
Did
what
you
know.
regret having a crack at it though?
Never. You learn so much.
Yeah.
And I suppose it's that balance of, you've got to build a business, you've got to bring the money in the door. You know there's huge paycheck at the end of some of those deals, but the time involvement, the distraction from your main business, at the time, it just wasn't the right thing. But had to go, couldn't help, pass it on and say sorry. But yeah, but you still maintain your professionalism. You be very careful of not burning the client or burning your bridges, but you take it to the point where you basically admit defeat. I can't help you on this. Somebody else will have to.
I hear. Mr. Dinte, what about you? Have you ever given anything a crack that just didn't work? I'm not saying it was disastrous, but
honestly can't think of one thing that I tried.
Did you ever buy leads that didn't work?
Oh, yeah.
No, I've
No,
never
didn't
paid
go into
for
that?
leads. Never paid for leads. Social media has always been a bit of a challenge for me. It might be my age.
You got to press the buttons to do things on your computer.
You've got to press buttons, my maintaining a website is, I find, an OTT situation. I mean, I get other people obviously do a lot of that work, but some of it, I guess I just always see myself as a hands-on sort of person, so I like to try to do these things myself. And you do get to a stage where it's pretty comfortable what you're doing, what you've been saying.
You run into the groove,
and like, I'm a bit like Steve Rasmussen. I'm not out to set world records or whatever. I don't need to. And just ticking it along, looking after people, maintaining the relationship. I find that takes a fair bit of time. And just helping, particularly these days, I'm getting so many first home buyers and discovering that, like, they certainly do not even know what they don't know. It's not a case of what they don't know. It's just that they have no idea that they don't know so much. And just holding their hand figuratively and guiding them through it all. Dealing with having come from a bank and knowing the way things should work, and then when you find out from your clients that it hasn't worked because the bank hasn't done something right, and then you're having to make calls to the bank to get things sorted out.
Back on track.
So that's the figurative hand holding. I guess the only thing that really hasn't worked, the only thing that hasn't really worked, I have offered my services to a lot of the banks to train their staff in how to lend. So that's probably one thing that hasn't worked.
Geez, and what a great initiative that is. But anyhow, we can debate why, but we won't. It might go to a dark space. It won't help anybody out. Doesn't worry me, but it might you guys. Hey, Jayden, what about yourself? I mean, being still in that first 7-year break, have you had a crack at something? You said, bugger, that didn't work, whether it be a branding, marketing, advertising, or an area?
Yeah, I think like the hardest thing for when I started, I think like everyone, it's kind of like getting leads and getting customers, because you're not starting with Rolodex or anything. So yeah, like I guarantee I probably made more mistakes than probably a lot of brokers in that, because I've tried lots of things that just failed horribly. Like when I was in Sydney, actually, I spent about 4 mornings like at the, I forget what train station I was at a train station, just basically handing out pamphlets with my face and like a cheap home loan rate on it to people, just harassing them on their way to work. And that just ended up with me getting escorted off the platform, 4 days in a row. So there's a lot of that. Like I've tried a lot of mail drops. When I moved to the Gold Coast, I would have done like, I think 5,000 letters that I personally went mailbox to mailbox and dropped off letters with like, hey, I'm a broker, I can get you a cheap rate. And it just, I got sunburnt and no leads. So that didn't really work out well. So
Oh, the tanning obviously worked, mate. You look very well tanned. So that obviously was that worked good. You can't say that was a failure.
I'm still doing it. But like, I think that the thing with that, and the thing I learned was like, you've just got to try what's works for you. Like for my brother Nathan, he loves doing, when he started, he was doing cold calling. So he was doing that, and that worked really well for him. For me, it was probably more referral partners and relationships. So like, I did that, but like, unless you try stuff, you're not going to find out. So every kind of failure.
Do you regret taking any of those steps, whether they failed or not?
No, because you got to try it, and you got to try again. Like even in today's world, like mail actually might be a better way of doing it, because everyone gets 10 billion emails a day and pumped on social media with ads. So yeah, who knows?
Yeah, no, excellent. And I've always did that. Don't get me wrong, I've failed at many things, including 3 marriages, but we won't go there. But yeah, but I think it's a great learn. So long as you can learn from those things, I think is significantly the most important thing. And when Steve Rasmussen was saying earlier on, he started his time in CBA. I started my career, if I can call it that, in CBA in the 70s, and I just jumped into the deep end of everything. That's how I learned. I was a hopeless, and I still am, a hopeless reader of books. They gave me 3 books this deep, the Commonwealth Development Bank, Commonwealth Savings Bank, Commonwealth Trading Bank manuals, and said, sit down and read them. And bugger off, I didn't read any of it. I just went up the customer services counter, jumped in the deep end, and just tried to learn stuff. I'm hopeless at reading. But what you learn from that, I think, is really solid stuff. Mr. Dinte, I want to throw a question back to you off the cuff, if I may. And as well, none of this is prepped, and I say this genuinely from my heart. I remember when I joined Advanced Bank and first met you for the first time in that early 90s era. You were the man to beat, right? You were the guy writing the volume. You were the guy that had the basically the perfect submissions. The credit guys loved you there in Parramatta. You were the one to aspire to. And obviously, I guess a lot of that plays out to where you are today, and a part of that journey you described before about, there haven't been too many real failures along the way. What is your secret to success? Is there a recipe that you've lived by that has served you well through all of those periods? Is it just that you're a random? I don't know. There's something in that. I just as we've been talking, it's just something that generally most of us fail, and probably fail a lot. I think that's fairly normal. And for those lucky people who've got, whether it be a special or unique talent or a unique perspective on things, I think have a little secret piece of gold would be loved to understand more. Is there something like that for you that you reflect back on and say, well, I've always done it this way and it just works a treat?
Look, Pete, I'm a firm believer in a saying that I learned, and I couldn't even tell you when I learned it, and that was, people don't care how much you know, they just want to know how much you care. And when people get, it's a bit like a dog knows when you're scared, but it also knows when you're good-hearted. And I find clients are exactly the same. If they know, and you don't have to say the words, but if they just know that you are there for them and to help them and guide them, the rest of it doesn't seem as anywhere near as important. So I never get people sort of quizzing me about interest rates or anything. They just, Stephen, we need this, make it happen, and I just make it happen for them.
Okay, there you go. Some words of wisdom from Mr. Dinte. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I think that genuineness of caring plays out in many different levels. It plays out in your personal life, plays out in your business life, and also plays out in industry as well. And I think it's a very important piece that, I guess, a part of COVID has brought that out. Is people being more open to genuinely show that they care for one another and are there supporting one another, which I think is a really great thing. That's great. Steve Rasmussen, how are you going in preparation for the best interest duty? Got any concerns there, cruising all
No,
What's that like
No.
to you?
no major concerns. Like allowing that
Can
I'm
you
in a
phrase up on
situation
me
where
just as he was saying, oh, there you go.
you're back, or you're freezing. We right?
Yep, gotcha. Keep going.
Okay.
You're right.
I'm in a situation where I've always held my own license, number one. So I'm on my own, I don't have any assistance, so everything stops with me. I'm responsible for the whole box and dice. So apart from, I suppose, attending whatever webinars, training I can do between now and January 1, my main challenge is to ensure that I review my processes, I review, upgrade, adapt my documentation, that it all meets what it and provides what it has to do. The day-to-day living of best interest, I don't see for me that there's going to be any real great change day-to-day, client to client, apart from the ramping up of the note-taking, the file records and all that side of it. Because at the end of the day, that's, you're going to live and die by how well your records are kept. But delivering the best interest to the client, I'm comfortable that, for me, that's situation normal.
Yeah. Cool. Excellent. And look, I've been saying it since this all started that, you know, brokers around Australia are acting in the best interest of their client. And now you've got some regulatory framework around it, and that piece, that compliance piece to prove that you have is really where the hook is. Jayden, how are you going with it? What's your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, I think, like, having sort of read a fair bit about it, I think it's going to be pretty significant for a lot of brokers, because it seems to go a bit beyond the note taking that some people have sort of said. So, like, there's, you know, we've got to tell them if they're not eligible for the first homeowners grant, which previously we may not have documented that, or you know, really break down what their requirements are. So my only probably concern is it's probably the unknown, because we don't know until it gets tested how it's necessarily going to get interpreted with best interest duty. So if I told you, Pete, you should get a loan with an offset account, and then it gets tested in court and you should have actually had a basic, like, that's my only concern. It's kind of, we don't really know until it's all going to get tested in court how it potentially might play out. But I think all we can do, like Steve said, is just be really diligent where we can, document everything more than we used to, you know, keep copies of how we tried to educate people, because that's sort of part of it now, justify why we went to a bank and why we didn't recommend others, talk about policy, which we probably never previously did, you know, serviceability, why we just went to a specific bank. So stuff that we wouldn't have probably previously documented to that level, we're just going to have to now.
ASIC have said repeatedly that if something goes to court, it's your documentation is the thing they're going to go looking for, and that's the thing that'll make or break you. So everything is about documentation. We've got it is, but you aptly pointed out, Jayden, that there's more to be done. So you've got to prove that you've been able to do. There's an education piece to educate your borrowers on what the process is and what the product's about and its pros and cons and disclosures that go with that. You know, it's also about detailing whether or not they're eligible for certain schemes, which we've never had to do as a part of a required process, which it is now. I know many aggregators are building their systems to cater for all this, but it's a new piece that we've got to be across at the same time. And these extra add-ons can be very challenging, especially when your argument's going to be around the nuances of law and how that gets interpreted. And Jayden, as you said, how it gets tested in court, that will provide some, I dare say, some challenges. But Mr. Dinte, what are your thoughts? Go on, Jayden, sorry.
And I think the thing that's probably gotten glossed over a little bit is that, like, we're liable for it as the brokers. So, you know, there's up to, I think it's like $1.5 million fine sort of per case. Correct. And yeah, like, we've just got to look out and make sure we protect ourselves. And the guidance from you guys and the documents that you provide have been pretty good. So if, you know, if anyone out there hasn't got the bid ready document, not trying to plug it for you guys, but like I've read it, it was genuinely helpful, so it was good.
Plug away. This is completely unscripted for everyone that's watching. He's just plugged the FBAA Best Interest Duty course. Go do it.
Yeah, it was really
I'm
good.
shameless, so
Especially-
I'm shameless. I'll plug it. But thank you, Jayden. That was appreciate that.
Yeah, just
But
from what we
yeah,
found, the guidance from the aggregators was just a bit light on. So they were sort of just like, oh, just take some notes,
okay.
do a one-pager. That's okay, but you have to document those conversations if they're eligible, why you did stuff, why you don't have lenders on your panel, etc.
Yep. Yeah. Mr. Dinte?
I have a fundamental problem with all of this, and it's not around.
We're not going into those.
I know. I'm sure I'm not the only one. You get a client in and you do all the work and you work everything out and you've talked to them and do the stuff, and you determine that XYZ bank is the best one and the particular product, blah, blah, blah. And you lodge the loan, and then for whatever reason, the bank comes back and says, oh, look, we can't give that person hypothetically a 30-year term. We can only give them 18 years, or it's something that you've put in, and when you've lodged the loan, you have complied in that this particular loan product and how I've structured it, etc. It is not unsuitable, right? And yet the bank then turns it around and changes it all, and technically the thing then becomes unsuitable. But hang on a minute, tomorrow afternoon is the end of the finance period. We have to exchange contracts. And so you go back to your client and say, well, look, we're getting screwed over here. We don't have time now to take you to another lender. And it's basically like your arms being twisted up your back. You've got to accept what the bank's now offering. And this is where I have a real problem, and like the number of fights I have with lenders.
Yeah, I dare say this is where APRA hopefully will take a stronger participation in those sort of issues, when the responsible lending obligations, assuming it gets through the House, come and by the end of the year and then implemented in March of next year, take over the responsible lending obligations that are currently in the hands of ASIC. So we transitioned across to APRA.
Is there any
waited
talk of
through the
them
banks
taking on the bid? Like, obviously the responsible lending, they've flagged to kind of relax that in March. Have they extended that to bid at all?
No, and look, I think we've got to be careful of what we read in the media. That responsible lending obligations really aren't going to be relaxed. They're going to be transitioned into somebody else's hands to manage as such. But that means that the provisionings, generally the provisionings that ASIC has had around responsible lending move or go, but it still will apply to small cap lending and consumer leases. So RLO will still apply there. But what will happen is that APRA's guidance through to the lenders will basically just be the direction of which responsible lending conduct and obligations are met. So APRA will say, ABC Bank, you must do this, 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 and this. And then from our point of view, you're meeting a responsible lending obligations. That gets passed down through the aggregator to the broker. And therefore, you're getting dictated by the bank saying, if you want to do this loan, you have to do this, 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 and this. And that ticks the box for responsible lending, right? It's just going about it a different way. There's going to be more framing than just that. And we've been in close consultation with Treasury on this, and even as the other day that we were just speaking to them, and they're fashioning up in preparation to try and get the bill through the House ready for information next year. It will still play out. It's not like brokers won't have any responsible lending obligations. You do. It's just the dictator of what that looks like comes down through the bank and through that process, rather than ASIC going on a direct approach, sort of coming that way. There's no loosening off of the best interest duty. In actual fact, as of yesterday, there is a ratcheting up of the best interest duty that doesn't apply to any of you guys. It applies to the definition of a finance broker as described by Treasury last year, which we objected to. But basically what happened was it meant finance brokers, people who just write car loans for the sake of a simple example, sorry about that, they got carved out of the best interest duty unless they did more than 3 or 4 home loans a year. What's happening is that it's being proposed by Treasury now that they will get captured under a best interest duty. And there's a whole new level of complexities for people who write motor loans, never written a home loan, to understand what a best interest duty is, to have systems, technologies and processes in place to deal with it and cope with it. those who deal with an aggregator will probably be okay. But those who don't deal through a normal aggregator because they don't do home loans, so they may go off on something else, do it themselves or whatever, have a new duty that they've got to try and apply to. And that's going to be difficult from them, or for them, I should say. So, it's something we're going to have to watch. And we're working with Treasury at the moment. This only transpired yesterday. So we've got another meeting with Treasury, a longer consultation message with Treasury next week. The simple reality is they come out with this yesterday and say, we're changing the rules and it's going to look like this, and here's half a dozen documents for you to read. And by the way, you got till the 20th. You got 2 weeks to get your submission in. Now, I've been doing this probably way too long. That instantly says, doesn't matter what we say, nothing's changing. The only thing that changes, because you've already made up your mind, that's why that's why it's such a short consultation period. Unless someone happens to find out something that's fundamentally flawed, it's the only thing that's going to change anything. Otherwise, it's a done deal. So we all spend all this enormous amount of time and money with external consultants guiding and advising, get our submissions in, knowing full well they're going nowhere unless we find a fundamental flaw. Now, I don't know if there's going to be one, mind you. And like I said, for mortgage brokers, no impact. So mortgage brokers don't stress. But if you're in the car game, just being a broker writing motor vehicle loans, you got a new world about to hit you that you weren't expecting, and that'll flow on to a whole host of other things as well. And Steve, if I remember, you wanted to speak a little bit around conflicted remuneration, because
Yes.
This is an area that motor vehicle dealers are used to their incentives and bonuses, well, not motor vehicle dealers, but in the broking space. Motor vehicle dealers probably won't get captured by this new piece of movement on the best interest duty, because they'll work under what's called a linked credit providers agreement for floor plans and so on, and having their one arm of lending, whether it be through a franchise lender or whatever it may be. If they broker a deal out, then in my mind they'll get captured. But Steve, what did you want to talk about around the responsible, not responsible lending, around the conflicted remuneration piece?
Time will prove whether I'm right or wrong. I have a fundamental belief that broking as we know it now will end in the not too distant future. I believe that in the same way that government bounced on financial planners and upfront commissions, that the same thing will happen in our industry. And basically the government will say, upfront commissions have got to stop. The lenders, and call me cynical because, yeah, I am, the lenders will turn around and go, oh, look, we really do want to pay you, but we can't. We're being stopped by this government, and it's really hard, but because we really want to pay you. And the truth is, as soon as the banks stop paying upfront commissions, their profitability is going to go through the roof again, and particularly when it comes to the big banks. The guys at the top of the food chain there all get their big bonuses based on profitability and share price.
As always.
I just have this. I believe going forward, brokers are going to need to get to a position where they are charging a fee for service. And in the same way, and I mean, I'm doing it now, but in the same way, years ago, I transitioned from visiting my clients to having them come to my office. I am now transitioning across from concentrating solely on upfront commission, and I am now also charging a fee for service. Now, I do a lot more for the client rather than just, here's a home loan. So as I'm doing a lot more for them to justify getting that money off them. But as I say, time will prove me right or wrong, but I just think that government, and I don't care which side of the fence it is, government will turn around and stop upfront commissions because they will deem it as a conflicted remuneration. And I don't know how they can't see it that way. If it's not the client that's paying you, but the bank that's paying you, it is a conflicted remuneration. Yeah,
but the balance in that though, Steve, is that, and this is a piece that doesn't play out today and could play out in the future, that would mitigate that very real and appropriate conversation, is that if all the banks paid the same, then there's no conflict. right? I'm not getting paid more here and less over there, and I give all my loans over there where I get paid more. So if that balanced out, and there's a whole host of issues around competition law through the ACCC that has a challenge with that. But I mean, it's transparent market peace. But if principally, and government could do this, is legislate that it's that amount, which was almost where Labor was going last when we went into the federal election, and their viewpoints on the Financial Services Royal Commissioner's recommendations around this was where they were really going with that, which was sitting around. They didn't define it, but in my mind was around 1.1 plus GST plus aggregation costs. That started to create a flat position, a quantifiable position, which would remove that potential conflict. I don't think, with my discussions with government, that they'd ever want to do is to ban upfront commissions. The conversation is always around trail, generally with politicians. But to make it a fee-for-service model, we've got the 2022 review, which is very important, and reflecting on what you're saying, Steve, it would be a brave politician to turn around and say to home borrowers across Australia, it's now going to become more expensive to get a home loan because you're going to have to pay to get it. I don't think that is not going to win votes. So from a political point of view, in the near term, and the near term could extend out to 5 or 10 years, that I can't see any government wanting to push that, because who'd vote for them? Given that the greater population of voters are probably in that home buying bracket or in the investment bracket, if all of a sudden the government is going to change, or the government is going to turn around and make you pay for something that you've had free for the last 30 years, you're not going to stay in government. So I think that's where the Achilles comes to that.
Yeah, it's also really anti-competitive, which was the point of BID, to push, brokers to use smaller lenders. And even with the last REM review, I think there was something like, regional banks, Suncorp, BOQ needed like 200 extra branches to be able to get the distribution that brokers provide. So it would just kill all the second tiers, Macquarie, ING. So that's why I think they would be pretty concerned about doing that.
Yeah, guys, we're really close on time, and I have a question here that's come in that I do want to ask, and it probably falls more to you, Steve Dinte, because it's a New South Wales question. I'll read it out and see if you've got an answer. Well, it's about New South Wales government.
We are going to win next Tuesday night, don't worry. That's the question.
Okay, good luck with that. That's okay. Steve, so the question is, I would like to know how we can question the government in New South Wales. It's not standard to have a finance clause, and some builders will not allow. Therefore, our first home owners have to commit to buy land and to place deposit on a construction, as we need a full building contract to qualify for the first home owners deposit scheme. So they risk losing 0.2%, unsure about building contract deposit. We always recommend to normal clients to wait for formal approval prior to committing to a purchase. What is the best outcome? So a lengthy piece there, but I guess it's for first home buyers and the first home owners, or the first home loan deposit scheme, finance clauses. Do you come across issues for first home buyers or builder people who are constructing and not having a finance clause in their contracts?
Absolutely, it is a concern. I've actually built my whole business for the last 25 years around construction finance. That's been my forte. So I obviously have a lot of contacts in the game, and it's not uncommon for me to ring the builder and basically tell them to pull their head in and just say, look, I'm working with this client. We're going to get this loan together. We need this, this, and this from you. When we have a formal approval, the client will pay you your deposit on your building contract. And I guess, again, it's one of these things where time has its advantages, because so many of these guys know me. If I say, look, this loan is going to go through, they accept that, and things just progress normally. How do I help somebody who doesn't have the same experience? It's a tough question. It really is. But at the end of the day, I've always found that talking is the solution. So whether it's talking to the land vendor, whether it's talking to the builder, just keeping those lines of communication open and just saying, look, we need to do this in a sequential order, and we can't go outside of that order. and this is how it's going to play out.
Mm.
I find that works for me. Actually, do you know what? One of Sydney's biggest builders is just trying to call me now. I can't believe it. How's that? Funny thing,
Well, there
my
you
phone's sitting next to me.
So to Sandra, who asked that question, I guess there's probably no change in government. What it's all about is a high level and strong level of communication with the builder to understand the process and the transparency of what's going on.
I always say to the client, because obviously they don't know, they've never done it before, so it's a big learning curve. And I always put it back to the client, say, listen, if the builder is putting that much pressure on you, they must be really
What's
desperate.
going on? Yeah.
And do you really want to deal with somebody who is sort of pushing you so hard? Are you maybe better off finding another builder?
Yeah, there's a very valid point.
Yeah.
We might start to wrap up on that. I got a question here from Adam asking, do I think there'll be an abolishment of trail for the future? I think it's a risk, but I don't think it'll happen, or it'll become something new. Maybe what they were looking at 12 months ago. I'm not going to dwell on that one because we are out of time. I want a quick answer from each of you on this, and let me find out where the question is. What are your stress coping mechanisms? Jayden, what do you do for stress coping besides throw a brick at someone? That's what I like to do.
Go for a walk. Yeah, try to avoid certain banks. Nah, I think the only way, just regular exercise. Like I try and go sort of Monday to Friday. That's the best way.
Yeah, exercise. Mr. Dinte?
Red wine.
Red wine. I like you. I like you. I love that idea. Mr. Rasmussen, besides running away and not getting stung by bees, stress coping mechanism?
I like the red wine, but for me, it's step out of the office, take a walk. Yeah. It's clear the head and get away, and then come back with a fresh outlook.
Excellent. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your conversation this morning. It's been wonderful. I appreciate it. Love talking to you guys. Love your wisdom and insights. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Trust you have a great rest of the week. Take care.
Thanks, Pete.
Thanks, Pete.
Thank you.
See you guys. Say hi. All righty. What a wonderful group of gentlemen they are, and so much knowledge and wisdom to learn from their experiences. And I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. So my thank you to Jayden, Stephen, and Stephen for sharing their time with us this morning. All right, before we go, what's coming up next fortnight? I mentioned a little bit earlier, International Men's Day we'll be celebrating. We celebrated International Women's Day in late February this year, just before COVID hit, so we got in there quick. Now it's time to celebrate International Men's Day. Please join us. Make sure you get your Hawaiian shirts on, register to be a part of the day. It's going to be great fun. And of course, women as well as men are obviously welcome to join us. It'll be a fun time. That's 2 weeks' time, and 2 weeks after that, it's early December, and we'll be having David Carson, our regulatory expert, with us to talk further on those last bits and pieces around a best interest duty. Don't miss it. It'll be your last chance to speak to someone who is ex-ASIC, who wrote large portions of NCCP to give some guidance on this. Anyhow, thank you, and thank you to our sponsors for their support. Appreciate all they do for us. And of course, don't forget, you're going to get an email from us. It'll have your CPD code on it, as well as a little survey to finish off with. But and of course, you can watch all the series of Q&A with Whitey on YouTube, as well as this one that'll be up next week, if you want to rewind and watch it again. Again, thank you, stay well, and I look forward to talking to you in, well, be 4 weeks' time, or if you're joining us for International Men's Day, speak to you then in 2 weeks. Take care, everyone. Bye for now.